So when you're a little kid and your dad goes to prison, does a part of you go with him? Well, joining us now is Fringe Festival favorite Tracey Erin Smith, who's back in her most personal show yet, and she is here in studio to tell us all about it. Welcome to What She Said.
Thanks, Kate.
So we have a Seder, a spiritual healer, a maximum security prison, a mansion in Forest Hill, fraud, Jewish gangsters, and more, all based on apparently a true story. Tell us what inspired The Big House, which is the name of the show.
Okay, what a great question. This past year, I found myself in a maximum security men's prison in California. And just as they were debriefing us before we went in, and one of the things they told us was, if you are taken hostage, we will not pay the ransom for your release. I was like, what the heck am I doing here?
Did you turn it around?
So,
obviously not.
I didn't. I went in and had an incredible experience that I will never forget. But it also made me wonder, why was I spending my own money to go into this kind of environment? And then when we had to introduce ourselves, we're supposed to say our name, the name of our company, and why we were the best coach for these men, because they were in an entrepreneurial program to teach them how to create their own businesses, because when prisoners are released, they often have a very hard time getting hired, so this at least gives them a shot. So I'm step up to the mic. I'm in front of 50 prisoners, 25 volunteers, 10 staff, and all the armed guards with machine guns at the back of the gym. And for some reason, goodness knows, I can't think straight. And what? And instead of my name, I start to sing Amazing Grace. In my head, I'm like, what is happening? And then the next thing I say is, hi, my name is Tracey. The last time I was in a prison, I was 7 years old visiting my father. So I promise to do whatever it takes to help you today. And that got me thinking, or realizing, oh, maybe that's why I've flown my adult self to go visit men in prison, because I need to revisit that from my childhood and take a look at the impact.
Work through it.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Work through it.
So a cathartic sort of exercise.
Exactly.
And was it?
It was. They did this. We listened to them pitch their business ideas, and we were sort of like Dragon's Den coaches. Have you seen that show where people pitch their business ideas? And but then it got very personal, and they did an exercise called Step to the Line, where they had all of the inmates and all the volunteers facing each other, just about a foot apart, and they would read statements, and if the statement was true for you, you step to the line. And they did everything. They started very easily. They said, I like hip-hop. Everybody stepped to the line. And then it went more intimate in terms of I've lost someone I love to gang violence, or I've lost a parent to suicide, which is something I had in common with a lot of the men. And then we shared with each other something we couldn't forgive ourselves or somebody else for. And that's when a lot of the emotions started to come out. It was very intimate, very personal.
Okay, but how does this... Your work going in as teaching them entrepreneurial skills, I see that. But then how does this connect with what happened with your father, who was sentenced for white-collar crime in Toronto, and you went to visit him back then? And how does all this connect into a Fringe Festival show?
Well, I wanted to bring the stories of the men inside the prison to the public, because these are stories that are rarely heard. And one thing I'm really passionate about are taking stories from the peripheral into the mainstream. And then I thought, what if I combined that with my own story of what it was like to grow up? We had this mansion in Forest Hill. Then my father was charged with fraud and found guilty and sent to jail. We lost everything. And it was on the front page of the Toronto Sun. So I had a lot to identify with in terms of the families of the incarcerated men. And when they graduated from this program, their kids came in to watch them graduate. So I really sort of saw my 7-year-old self when I was visiting. So it was very connected, and it was a way to get their stories out, but also relook at and work on mine.
What was the toughest part of that for you? From 7 on?
Well, my cousin, which I talk about in the show, told me about when she took us to visit my dad. And one thing I didn't know was that when they brought him into the visiting room, I wouldn't look at him. I wouldn't talk to him. And I think it's because, you're in so much pain and you're so confused about where one parent has gone that when you finally see them, the anger comes out or the fear comes out more than the love. I'm sure I wanted to hug him so much, but I didn't.
Now, please correct me if I'm wrong, but you also, I thought I heard you mention that you had a parent that committed suicide.
So my dad ended his life in 2010.
Okay, so he took his own life. So he was long out of prison at that point.
Yeah,
so any
yeah,
connection with that? Do you think it was because everything was shattered in his life?
That's such a good question. My father, during his life, never really apologized for the damage that he caused our family and other families. And in the weeks, I'd say about 10 days before he died, we were having breakfast at Starbucks in the Annex, and he finally broke down, and he told me his life story, and he said, I hurt so many people, and he apologized then, and he was, I think, in his own mind on his way out at that point.
What's your biggest regret? Because you say they asked. That was one of the questions.
The one that I shared in prison was that I'm not certain I did everything I could to stop his suicide, which I have since worked through, because truly when someone wants to end their life, they will, and they'll find a way. You can do lots of things to try to get in the way, but my father lied at the end and said he was going away for a couple of days and that he'd be back.
Oh. So you've managed to add humor.
Yeah,
to
I was
what
just gonna
sounds
say,
like a
can I
heartbreaking
throw in some
situation.
jokes right now or
like,
something?
Absolutely, because this is not a depressing piece of work by any means.
No, not at all. So one of my trademarks, dare I say, or just the way I was born, is humor is one of the languages I speak. It's been a survival mechanism. It's how I help to connect with other people. And so in the show, part of the show is this Seder scene. And it is where I've thrown my relatives into a Passover Seder, which is where us Jews normally get together, families. And there's all the things that go back and forth, the people arguing with each other, judging each other, saying ridiculous things. And then as the Seder goes on longer, the more deeper things and resentments and truths are outed.
So what do you hope people take from the show?
So one of the themes of the show is what I would call the epidemic of loneliness. And I talk in the show about how I live in a small bachelor apartment in Parkdale, and my sister has a really big house and a husband and kids and a Labradoodle. And that and I look at, why am I alone? And also that recently in England they appointed a minister of loneliness, and that it's not just me. Like, our modern society has somehow promoted this idea that living alone is great, or for so many reasons. And I hope that at the end of this piece, people feel more willing to reach out and connect, more willing to look at their own past in order to help them understand things so they can create the future they want and they're not being held back by certain things. And after each show, I'm going to invite the audience to come join me for a drink and some nachos at the bar next door to walk my talk, so that, I'm actually connecting humans face to face in real time.
It's a lovely sentiment.
Yeah, it is. And you're continuing your work inside prisons with...
So I've been back twice. I would love to go again. I would love to create a show in a women's prison, if anyone's listening who has connections inside a women's prison. I help people tell their life stories on stage. So I think that would be really powerful for them and the people on the outside.
So the Big House opens on Thursday?
On Thursday night.
So that's July 4th, and it runs till the 14th, so 10-day run at the Factory Theatre main space in Toronto. You can buy tickets now at fringetoronto.com.
That's right.
And there's singing involved.
Yeah, there's singing, there's me singing, there's something else I won't mention right now. But
no spoilers. No
spoilers.
Spoilers. Now, how can people connect directly with you?
Oh, thanks for asking. My website, TraceyErinsmith.com, and Tracey has an E in it.
So TRACEYERIN Smith we can do.
Smith we can do.
Smith we can do. Okay, and are you working on something new after this?
Well, this is a brand new show, so it's sort of all-consuming. But I'm working on teaching some intensives in Ontario, and then at Hollyhock in BC, and then in Toronto in the fall. So anyone who wants to tell their own story on stage, that's my passion.
All right. Tracey Erin Smith, thank you very much. And break a leg with the Big House.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, she